video is going to be all about fluke fishing, and I'm going to be bringing you my personal experiences with these baits and a couple things I do a little bit different than most people to hopefully help you put a couple extra fish in your boat. In today's video, I have it broken down into 3 separate topics. First, we're going to talk about what the fluke is and a couple of my favorite colors to throw. Next, I have 2 separate rigging options. Each of these has their own place in my arsenal, and when I see certain things out in the water, it makes it really clear to pick up whichever one. And lastly, we're going to talk about the retrieves. Retrieving with a fluke is kind of an endless possibilities thing. There's no wrong way to do it, but there are a couple of consistent ways I've seen that puts a lot of fish in my boat, and it changes day to day, so I want to shed a little bit of light on that to hopefully shorten your learning curve on fluke fishing and make you a little bit more productive out there on the water. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into a few of my favorite colors and ones that I will throw day in and day out on the lake when I am throwing a fluke. It can be extremely intimidating if you walk into your local tackle store, or if you're scrolling online and you see 100 different colors of flukes. It's a lot to take in, and you're often left with which ones should I buy. So hopefully these couple of my favorites will help you figure out which ones you need to be throwing out on the water. If I could only have one, it would hands down be this pearl white. You've heard me talk about it with my Sebills and some of the other top waters. I like to keep it extremely simple, and this white is so consistent for me just because of its bold presence in the water, and it really is able to draw fish from a great distance to come look at it, and more times than not eat it. So that white is one I will have tied on probably 90% of the time, and day in and day out, this is the most consistent color in my boat. It's no secret, but if you could only have one, I'd pick up a pearl white fluke. Now, going along with the flukes, I will switch it up a little bit more. It's a lot easier to kind of adjust your color fluke than switch out a hard bait or something of that nature. 2 of my second favorites are this disco green right here and this disco violet. These can be extremely productive on those sunny, calm days when there's not a lot going on in the water. These are a little bit more translucent, and they have some either green, or this violet right here has a little bit of purple iridescent flake to them. These can be a big time player when it is calm, or these fish are getting a good look at your bait and you think you need something a little bit more natural. I kind of like these translucent patterns, and they've been a big time player for me over the years. Lastly, I want to talk about 2 other colors that are a little bit more situational for me, but they definitely have their place in my boat and be ones that I will implement when I do see the conditions are fit for them. The first one is actually a chartreuse fluke. This is something I've seen in my smallmouth fishing up north that I've actually been able to translate into my spotted bass and largemouth fishing down at home. This is a killer on Lanier and Hartwell. It has just an obnoxious presence in the water, and sometimes on those low light days, if there's a lot of wind and these fish are feeding heavily, you can throw this one and get a little bit bigger bite sometimes. It's not one I'm going to throw every day, but sometimes, like I said, if you have a lot going on, if it's low light, windy, this can be a big time producer. Similarly to that chartreuse fluke, this ham bone fluke is a little bit more local to the Lanier and kind of Hartwell area, but this bait gives off an incredible silhouette in the water. And when I do think that pearl white is a little bit too strong and just a little bit too much for the fish, I will grab this ham bone. It excels in cloudy conditions, and it really gives them a different profile in the water for me, because that white can be too overpowering at times, and this is a little bit more muted. I'm not going to say it's more natural, but it definitely gives them a different look that they're not quite used to seeing 100% of the time. So that ham bone is a little bit sneaky, but one that I definitely will have tied on when I do feel like the watercolor is permitting it, or if the fish are not really committing to that pearl white one. Alright guys, let's go ahead and jump into the second topic of today's video, and I'm going to take a couple moments to go over 2 of my favorite rigging options for these flukes. I have one for a certain situation when I see these fish kind of in that upper portion of the water column, and I have another one that works a little bit better when those fish are in that 5 to 15 foot range, and when they're a little bit tighter to cover, I will grab this second one. So moving into it, my first rigging option is this standard 4/0 Gamakatsu round bend style hook. This is actually an O'Shaughnessy style A little bit different bite than your traditional round bend style hook. And I think it allows me to put a couple extra fish in my boat every day just due to that bite. It's a little bit different, I guess you could say, and for whatever reason I seem to land a couple more fish with that style hook. It's kind of one of those secrets of the pros. I know a lot of guys love that O'Shaughnessy style, and I'm definitely one of them and a big time believer in it. But like I said, this is one I will grab when those fish are in the upper portion of the water column. And what I mean by that is if they're actively schooling or willing to come up and eat baits on the surface or right under the surface, and I'm working that fluke extremely fast, that is when I'll grab this standard 4/0 round bend style hook. It's a great hook to turn those bites into fish that actually hit your front deck, and I haven't found a better hook for a fluke than this one. Now, my second rigging option is something I've developed over the past year and had a lot of success with in my tournaments and overall just fishing out there on the lake. And it's a little bit kind of a sneaky thing I've figured out, and I want to show y'all because I think it allows your fluke to work in a completely different water column than flukes are traditionally seen at. Like I said, the worm hook is great in that upper portion of the water column, but this 3/0 cover shot hook right here is one that I like to throw when those fish are in that 5 to 15 foot range. And I actually do something that I haven't seen a lot of people do, is I take a lead suspend strip right there. Those are made by Storm. I think you can get 100 of them for $7, so they're super inexpensive, but it's a great way to get your fluke a little bit deeper and keep it in that strike zone a lot longer. So when those fish are set up a little bit deeper, that is when I will grab that cover shot, and just allows me to keep that bait in that lower portion of the water when those fish are not willing to come up and feed, whether that may be due to boat traffic or time of the year, whatever it may be. When those fish aren't wanting to come up, that cover shot with that little lead suspend strip is a great option to really give these fish a look at a fluke and kind of a depth zone that they're not accustomed to seeing a fluke in. I think that's been a big time reason for my success in this past year of fluke fishing, is I'm showing these fish a bait in a portion of the water that they traditionally don't see it in. So that cover shot with that little bit of lead is a winner, and something I haven't seen a lot of people do, but can be a great option when those fish are set up a little bit deeper. Alright guys, let's jump into the third topic of today's video, and probably the most important one, and that will be the actual retrieve of these flukes. Like I said, when I am fishing this worm hook, I will be fishing it extremely fast on the top of the water, almost skipping it and intentionally trying to get this bait to come out of the water at a very high speed to get a core feeding response out of these fish. I want these fish to see something on the top of the water, going over them extremely fast, and feel like there's a fleeing herring or there's just something going on top of the water that makes them come up and just check it out and see what's happening. I will fish this with very quick twitches and kind of integrating a reeling to get those fish to respond to it. There's not an exact science to it. It's really day-to-day based and something that you will have to play with and figure out what kind of mood those fish are in on that given day. But you can start out by reeling this fluke extremely fast and doing some erratic twitching and just play with it and see how those fish are reacting to it, and tweak your retrieve based on how those fish are responding to it. Now, the second rigging option I briefly went over y'all with was this cover shot with a little bit of lead on it. This is one I will actually let sink down to the fish 10, 15, 30 seconds until I see those fish on live scope start to move. Then I will integrate a reeling and twitching cadence, and it really seems to be an effective way to get these fish to pull off of brush piles or roaming fish on bait. Wherever you are throwing this fluke, if you are throwing this cover shot with a little bit of weight, it can be extremely effective, letting it sink down to them and then beginning your retrieve in that lower portion of the water. And more times than not, when they do see this bait, they will be willing to come up all the way to the top if you are working it faster. But letting it sink down and giving them a visual of this bait before you start that is a super big thing I've learned over the past year with forward-facing sonar. and it seems like if you can get them to see it, then they are willing to come up. But letting it sink down is something that I've learned over the past few months has been a big time producer for me, and something y'all definitely need to integrate into your fishing. And if you do have a live scope unit or one of the other forward facing sonars, I would play with sinking it a little bit and letting these fish rise up to it before you actually start working it and doing your twitch or reel cadence. So those are a couple of my favorite retrieves with these flukes. I hope some of these tricks and tips helped y'all in your fluke fishing. Let me know down in the comments below if any of this did, and if you are interested in getting on the water and visually learning some of these techniques, I'd love to have you out on a trip. And that's truly the way to understand some of the stuff I am telling you guys, because I can tell you all the right baits, the hooks, the colors, the rods, and it truly doesn't come into action until you actually see it happening and you have someone there really breaking down why these fish are eating and why they're here, and really the behind the scenes of what makes them eat. So if y'all are interested in a trip, I'll leave my information down below. You can see that all on my website. But thank y'all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like and subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated, and we'll see y'all in the next one.